The question that everyone has been asking me for the longest time now is, do I regret selling my Tenere 700? All right, so for long-time viewers of the channel, you'll remember that I did own a Tenere 700. It was the first year that they came out, so I think it was a 2019 model, but I purchased it in 2020. And I owned that bike for almost 2 years. So before I jump into answering the question of do I regret selling the T7, I'll give you a bit of backstory as to why I sold it and what ultimately led me to the 250. In this one in particular is the WR250R, and then we'll get to whether I regret it. So start of 2022, I'd owned the bike for well over a year. I loved the T7, absolutely loved it. It was my first big adventure bike. I'd had a dual sport prior to that, but I wanted something with a little bit more power, a little bit more comfortable for adventuring. The T7 came out. I was watching all the videos that were coming out on it, and I'm like, I have to have that bike. So went and bought one brand spanking new and put a bunch of mods on it, took that thing through some technical stuff, and did some camping on it, adventures. Again, absolutely loved that bike, but then disaster struck. So at the beginning of 2022, I completely detached my pec tendon off of the humerus bone, your arm bone. It wasn't in a motorcycle related incident. I was actually doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and yeah, complete detachment. Had to get surgery, and what that meant was that there was at least 6 months of no off-road riding, and that's what the surgeon said. So, and they did say that you probably wouldn't even be close to full strength up until about a year after the surgery. And that left me thinking, wow, what am I gonna do with my bike? So I had the T7 at the time, and I also had a KTM 450 EXE, which was my Enduro bike. So I didn't want to hold on to 2 bikes that I couldn't ride, especially because I was also looking at purchasing a house at this time. So the KTM 450 was the first one to go, because at least with the T7, I thought, you know what, maybe I can get back on the road a little bit sooner. So I'll keep the T7. But not long after, the T7 went as well, and I sold that bike. And one of the hardest things to do, because I, again, absolutely loved the bike. It was just perfect for what I wanted. Again, I could take it through technical stuff, I could do camping, it was comfortable, and that was, the bike I had before that was a CRF 250L, so it was a big upgrade. And yeah, I had immediate sadness seeing it taken away from me by the new owner. And you might ask, well, you know, why didn't you hold on to it? And you know, once you're healed, you've got a bike that you can ride on road, and then as soon as you can ride off road, start going off road. Well, I had a couple of months to think about this because, you know, I was in a sling. I couldn't do anything really. So all I was thinking about was riding. And I thought that when I do come back, I don't want to be muscling a heavy bike around, picking it up in awkward positions and on hills. And, you know, if you've watched my videos, I love tackling challenging stuff, and I really enjoyed doing it on the T7 because it was a challenge. But at the back of my head, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to risk re-injuring this, because for that 1 year post-surgery, you're much more likely to re-tear it again, because it's only being held by a little bit of wire to the bone or string. So I thought, man, like the T7, maybe it's not the best idea holding on to it and using that as my first bike when coming back to off-road riding, because at the end of the day, it is a big, heavy bike, and you know, when you're involving weight, you're much more likely to injure yourself when you come off, or again, when you're picking up the bike in awkward positions. So some time passed, and I felt like I could start road riding again. Didn't have any bikes, so I ended up purchasing a VROM 1000. And the reason I went with that was because I wanted something that I could ride on the road, have some fun with, because they got, you know, over 100 horsepower and plenty of torque, but it was also a bike that I could start to do some off-roading. And when I talk about off-roading, not the traditional sense that I like, which is going through single track, technical trails, hill climbs, but just hitting some gravel tracks was at the back of my mind. And yeah, so I got that bike. I couldn't even ride it home. I got my dad to ride it home with me. I was following behind him in a car. I'd just gotten out of the sling, so I was just driving with one hand. And it was a manual car, so shifting back to the steering wheel, probably not the safest thing to do, but we got the bike home safely. And it was about a couple of weeks later that I felt comfortable to ride on the road. So had the VROM, and a month or two after that, I felt like, all right, I can start going off-road. And I even planned and went on a Flinders Rangers adventure, and that was two up with my fiance at the time, now wife. And the VROM was perfect, but as soon as I got back from that Flinders Rangers trip, or even on the trip, at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, man, I need something that can go off-road and tackle the technical stuff again. And that's where I started thinking, oh, maybe it wasn't the right choice selling the T7. I maybe could have gone to it. But there was a bike that had always piqued my interest. And unfortunately, at the time that I bought the WR250R, it was a little bit too expensive. But I was in a position now where the Yamaha WR250R was available. It was a bike that was within budget. And I think, well, I was thinking at the time, well, I can still adventure on a dual sport, and it will almost serve as my enduro bike as well, because I sold my KTM 450. So if I went with the T7, I wouldn't, no way I'd be tackling anything challenging, not for a while, like again, not till 1 year post-surgery. And this was at about, I might be getting the times and dates wrong, but it was within 6 months of the surgery, I think. Maybe, yeah, maybe around then. But I was nowhere near in a position to be doing hard off-road on a heavy adventure bike. So I went ahead, found this mint condition WR250R with barely any kilometers on it, bought it, adventurized it, still tackle technical stuff on it, even with all the adventure kit. And I use it in the traditional sense of a dual sport. Like there's days where I'll ride to a state forest like this, tackle technical terrain, ride it home in that same day. But I'll also go on big adventures out into the Australian outback, racking up lots of kilometers, thousands of kilometers in a short time frame, tackle technical challenges and terrain on those trips, and then ride it all the way back home. So it really has doubled as an adventure bike, an enduro bike, and a great all-rounder. But we get to the question that this video is all about. Do I regret selling the Tenere 700? Well, I'm just gonna say, absolutely not. I love the WR250R, and I've got zero regret selling the T7 and going with the lighter platform. But there is a few buts, all right? So those times when I'm on a big adventure and, you know, for a couple of the days it's only road riding on a freeway, yes, I miss the T7. The extra power to be able to sit at a higher speed, the less wind resistance, the comfier seat, all of those things are at the back of your mind when you're riding it. I'm like, damn it, I kind of wish I had the T7. But as soon as you get to the technical stuff, for example, on my Outback trip where we hit Goog's track, I was so much happier being on a lighter bike and more capable with the off-road stuff. It's just much more, I'm not gonna say much more enjoyable, because it is enjoyable pushing a heavy adventure bike through technical stuff, but it is better being on a bike designed for that specific terrain. And the WR, perfect in the sand. It's lighter weight, enough power to blast through. So there is trade-offs with going with something like this, but when you get to the terrain, you're happy you're on this bike. So the other thing with the WR, which I didn't know at the time whether I'd be satisfied with its, you know, single track performance and really technical terrain, I was thinking, oh, maybe I do need to get an enduro bike eventually once I'm really happy with how this is rehabbed. Once I got to that stage, I was thinking, oh, maybe I would need a KTM or, you know, one of the lightweight two-strokes. But honestly, the WR has been perfectly capable. Like, yes, it's not the best bike because it is heavier than those bikes. I've got, you know, accessories on here that make it not as great for enduro riding and single track, but the thing performs flawlessly. And you know, when I had the T7, I did do single track, but it was a big effort to muscle that bike around. And you just couldn't do as much of it because you'd be just absolutely exhausted. But on this, you almost feel like you're on an enduro bike, especially with the updated suspension. I've got the Technics on there. That's made a big difference. So I didn't feel the need to get an enduro. And that's not to say that I won't in the future, because I do think I want to enter a hard enduro at some point, maybe next year. So we might get an enduro bike for that. But honestly, for the stuff that I do, the WR is perfect. In terms of reliability, we all know the T7 is an ultra reliable bike, but the WR250R, just as reliable. You know, over 40,000 valve check intervals. Not to say that that means anything to do with reliability, but we know that these engines are pretty much bulletproof. And yes, the T7 is as well, but in that case, no regrets, because the WR250R, just as reliable. So I didn't want to make this video too long-winded. I really just wanted to get to the point that I don't regret selling the T7. There are obvious examples where the T7 is better than the WR250R. But again, for my use cases where I enjoy going for the day ride and tackling the challenging stuff and riding home, but then also going on the big adventures, maybe 1 or 2 a year, and then a whole bunch of weekends scattered throughout the year, the WR250R is just perfect. I'm so happy with the bike. I've racked up almost 14,000 kilometers on it now. And I've said it in previous videos that I will get 100,000 kilometers on this bike. Assuming nothing goes wrong, that's the plan. I've said that I'm going to own other bikes for ages, and I end up selling them. But honestly, with the WR250R, just has a special place in my heart. I've spent so much time and money modifying this bike, so I don't think I could ever let it go. Even if another adventure bike joins the stable, which, you know, maybe eventually it will, I think the WR250R is always going to be there. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll catch you in the next one.